All right, now that we've finished taking a look at the command panel, let us look at another very important area in the 3dsmax user interface.
A vital part.
Yes, that's right, and that's going to be everything related to animation on the UI. And there's a few different areas that we're going to be looking at. Down here we've got our transport controls. Now this was lightly touched on when we were looking at the status bar earlier, but now we're going to spend just a minute and kind of go over what everything does. A general overview anyways. And of course over here we've got animation controls, and then we have the time slider. So now, you know, if you have a 3D package, the 3D package really needs to be able to do animation for it to be a 3D package. Otherwise, it's just going to be a modeling package.
Modeling, texturing, and rendering.
So bringing things to life is obviously important.
Yeah.
So, Bill, let's help everyone out. What is animation?
Animation. Well, animation is the ability to make an object's attributes change.
Okay.
And you can key those attributes.
Okay.
And basically, it's sort of like interpolating between one key to another key.
Okay, that's good. You sound nervous, Bill.
Yeah.
I'm just so excited about this
Suddenly
stuff.
the spotlight swivels.
That's very good. I'm just going to enhance it just a little bit. I usually like to say that animation is the change of a parameter's value over time.
Sure.
It really does come down to that. A lot of people like to jump on the moving bandwagon.
Yeah. What is animation? Animation
It's
is
the
stuff
thing
moving.
that's moving.
Right.
Well, all right, so tell me how the light intensity is moving if you have a flickering light in a dark room. It's not moving, it's the intensity
it's the changing of a parameter.
The point is, it's not always about motion.
That's right. So, obviously, throughout this course, we're going to be animating quite a few things. That is going to become important, so you guys are going to become intimately familiar with these animation controls located at the bottom. But back to the very generic explanation of animation that I gave, it is the change of a parameter value over time. Well, that means we're dealing with time. We must be able to measure time. We must be able to see time. And we are presented with time right here with a time slider. And when working in a 3D application, you deal with what is known as frames. That's right. And, you know, a certain amount of frames make up a second. And now we're talking about time in the world that we live in.
Which is continuous.
That's right. Now, you need to know what medium in the end you are creating your final scene for. I mean, are you shooting it out for film? Are you creating this for television broadcast? Is it made for a game? Because each of these different media types are going to have different frame settings / equate to time requirements. Well, I'm going to make this
different
complicated.
numbers of frames per second.
That's right.
Yes.
So in other words, for television, it's 29 point blah, blah, blah. We always just round it up and say 30 frames per second for NTSC in the United States.
I was going to say, all the people in the UK are like, excuse me.
The PAL people, that's right. And if we were rendering this out for, let's say, film, well, we're now dealing with 24 frames per second. Right. If we're rendering this out for games, it depends on the way the engine was created. You know, so I mean, we have a whole bunch of different variations that are available. So it is very important, obviously, when you're creating an animation that you are aware of what you're creating the animation for in the end.
That's right, which is something that we'll focus more deeply on later once we get heavier into animation itself.
That's right. Again, just a generic overview. Right now, though, let's say we're dealing with 30 frames make up 1 second as you and I know it. So that means we start here, and by the time we get all the way over to frame 30, you'll notice that as I am dragging the time slider right here, it is telling us what frame we are currently on, and it is also giving us an indication down below with a shaded bluish area. Okay? Let's make that dramatic. And then also we can see how many frames total that we're dealing with right now as we go from frame 0 to 100. Now, we're not going to get into the animation preferences animation settings, etc. But we do have the ability to come in and create or change our start and stop times for the animation. So because we have 100 frames when we start out and we decide, maybe I need 500 frames.
Sure.
It's not going to harm anything for us to go in there later and change it from an ending time of 100 to an ending time of 500.
Well, you'd hope not.
We definitely hope not.
Animated shorts would take on a whole new meaning.
So basically, this is our time slider, and it's very important to understand how this works. And from there, anytime you have the ability to manipulate time by somehow going through it, in this case dragging the time slider, we need other ways that we can play through the time. like as if it was like a VCR or a DVD player,
I was
right?
going to say, you can't say VCR.
No, I know. That's why I was like, okay, all right. So
A tape deck.
two-thirds of our audience doesn't know what a VCR is.
What is a VCR? Excuse me.
So we need the ability to do things like play, go back to the very beginning, click through frames, etc. Specify a specific frame to jump straight to if we have a very complex scene and it's hard to drag our time slider through because of the feedback we get. So we have all of these abilities provided for us down here, and this section is called, let me see the mouse again real quick, this section is called our transport controls. Okay, it's as simple as that. We do, of course, over here have animation settings, or this is our time configuration button, as you will.
This is where we could adjust that range of animation.
I just always kind of look at this as our animation settings in a sense, where this is where our start time, the length of the animation, our end time. So if we wanted that 500, we come in here and set the length to 500, or just come and say that our end time will be 500. We can rescale time, set current time. We can set our frame rates, NTSC, as we talked about a second ago, PAL, film, or custom, as if we're creating for a game or some other
Or maybe
type.
for like a web movie, you just want 10 frames per second.
You got it, exactly. And then how are we going to display our time back down here? Right now we're displaying it in frames, so you can see we're on frame 5 of 100, and we have different types available. And then our playback, is it going to be real time, the active viewport only? Is it going to loop when it gets to the end? Will it loop back? What speed is it going to play? Right now it's at 1x, so it's going to play back at normal speed. We can speed it up, we can slow it down. There's all sorts of things in here that you guys can work with. And as we progress through this course, you're going to find us in here often changing things.
That's right.
But for now, boop, you've seen it. Goodbye. So from there, okay, I'm talking an awful lot. Bill, you want to talk about maybe some of the buttons found over here on animation controls?
Well, basically, I like to do a quick little example where we get started doing a small keyframe animation.
I love instructors that give me examples. That's right, guys. So, if you want to follow along, go for it.
So let's create a sphere.
The sphere.
Here's the Earth.
Sphere.
I'm going to shade that up with F4. I'm sorry, turn on wireframe unshaded. And I'm going to bring out the Move tool with W.
Oh, he's bringing out the Move tool, all right.
I'm going to slide it over on X just a little bit.
Uncle Bill?
We sure can with an Alt-W.
Yay.
Excellent.
Uncle Bill. Well. Okay, now let's start at time 0. Now I'm going to turn on Auto Key, which is a very, very cool and kind of a scary thing at first. But
and they make it even more scarier by making one-third of your UI turn red.
Oh. I know, every time I see that, big red flash, I always think, danger!
Exactly.
So.
Danger or
blood.
blood.
This kind of allows you to let Max set the keys for you.
Yeah.
If you will.
Hence the name Auto Key.
So now I'm going to go over to frame 100 all the way across.
The keys are automatic.
I'm just going to drag my sphere over to the other side of the grid. Now watch what happens when I let go. Boom. Keys have been set.
And you can see the keys.
Yep.
Looking down in your time slider on the little time ruler.
And here's what you would call an anchor key. This is sort of like the key that Max sets down at the beginning of your animation.
Right.
Automatically when you use Auto Key. So now if you actually slide the time slider back and forth,
Max will interpolate between the values found in both keyframes.
So you only have to define the start and the end.
Animation.
We have animation.
Yes, we do.
And Max interpolates the rest.
Now, a little bit later, we're going to get into keyframe animation. We'll discuss exactly what keyframe animation is, along with other types of animation available in 3ds Max.
Not to mention other ways you can actually create keyframe animation, different ways you can go about adjusting your keys, placing them down. I did want to say this, though, because we were talking earlier about the definition of animation, it being the change of a value over time, and that it's not always motion. And yet our first example was what?
Motion.
Moving a ball from one side of the grid to the other. But think about it. What actually changed? The ball's doing a lot more than just moving. We have its X translate value, which is a number. It is an attribute.
It's a parameter.
It's a parameter on the sphere that is changing over time, giving us motion.
That's right.
So even though the sphere is moving, fundamentally, we still have a change in value over time.
Precisely.
Right. In fact, why don't we actually grab the scale tool here? And we still have Auto Key turned on.
He's whipping out he's pulling the cool
big
stuff.
Guns now.
He's pulling the cool stuff out of his bag o' tricks.
And now if you look down, now the key has kind of a multicolor to it.
Aha.
Dun, dun, dun.
So now it used to be all red, and now it's red and blue.
Yeah, how cool is that?
Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
Zach, can you tell us about that?
I can. All of the various attributes on a transform for an object are color-coded.
Sure.
So red is going to be translation, blue is going to be scale, and green is going to be rotation, which we haven't animated yet, so you don't see anything in green right now.
Gotcha. Thank you, sir.
So now if we drag the old time slider, what does it look like?
I'm going to turn off Auto Key, and I'm going to rewind back to the start.
Using those transport
Now I'm actually
controls.
going to hit play. Let's see what happens. Whoa. So it wasn't just moving, we had keyed our scale as well.
Sound effects brought to you by Buzz.
By Jason Busby. I'm going to stop that now.
As you guys saw a few minutes ago in the animation settings or the time configuration dialog, we do have looping turned on, so it's looping.
Yep.
So this just see, we got a couple more things down there. We do have a set key button.
Right. If you don't want to automatically have Max set your keys for you, you can explicitly set them yourself using set key.
Okay.
Now, here's something that I don't expect you guys to fully understand right now. Again, this is just kind of seed planting. A lot of the exterior tools that have been added to 3ds Max require the use of auto key.
Right.
You don't have to think too hard about that right now. Just remember I said it for later, and then we'll just go ahead and move right on.
Sure.
All right, and thinking about it, we've got a few more buttons down there. Anything important? Let's see. Nothing that we need to really get into right now. Just understand that the drop down and the buttons that are down there all deal with animation. And that pretty much wraps up everything from our animation controls, our transport controls, and our time slider. And that will wrap up this introduction to the animation portion of the user interface. Thanks, guys.